Welcome to Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed. Get ready to dive into the world of nonprofit leadership and sustainability, where the passion and unstoppable dedication of those making a real impact are celebrated. With your host, Jarrett Ransom, get ready to explore inspiring stories and game changing strategies of nonprofit leaders from across the sector. In this season, we're focusing on critical management challenges that are key to the long-term success of nonprofit organizations. Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed is your go-to podcast for no-nonsense, in-depth conversations with the real-life superheroes of the nonprofit sector. Get ready to unleash your inner nerdiness and learn how to navigate and overcome the challenges that help build stronger, more sustainable organizations. Now, let's dive in and harness the collective power of our nonprofit networks to create lasting change.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I am so glad you're here. Today's episode features a truly insightful guest, Eva Fordham. She is founder and principal of Expert Philanthropy. She specializes in helping high net worth donors create thoughtful, strategic giving plans that align with their values and make a lasting impact. In our conversation, Eva and I explored the many layers of modern philanthropy, from what motivates different types of donors to the challenges they face navigating an overwhelming number of causes. Eva also shares how philanthropy advisors like her partner with wealth managers, estate planners, and CPAs to help clients bring their philanthropic visions to life. She talks about moving from good to great and separates a good donor experience from a great one, how to build authentic donor relationships, and how nonprofits can engage families across generations in meaningful giving. Eva also offered fascinating insights into the evolving philanthropic trends in Los Angeles, from the rise of donor-advised funds to shifting priorities in giving. She was an absolute joy to speak with, and I know you'll walk away with valuable takeaways to strengthen your donor engagement and your stewardship strategies. I want to give a huge thank you to Bloomerang for sponsoring this season and making it possible for us to have these critical conversations that help strengthen and inspire the nonprofit sector. So let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Eva Fordham on philanthropy strategies for high net worth donors. Well, Eva, I am so thrilled to have you. And for all of our listeners and possibly viewers, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm so glad that you're here. We've got to give. I mean, it would be a detriment if we didn't give a shout out to our friend, colleague, our mutual acquaintance, Muhi. Thank you, Muhi, for making this happen. This is that introduction that I'm referring to here. So Eva, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Jared. Such a pleasure and an honor to be a part of your talk today.
Well, hey, anytime I get to nerd out with a fellow friend, I am super stoked, super excited. So let's start off, right? Like we might have some listeners that aren't familiar with you. Tell us more about yourself, Eva, as well as like the role or roles, plural, right, that you play in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, Eva Fordham, I am the founder and principal of Expert Philanthropy. I help donors create strategies with their charitable giving, everything from identifying causes they want to support. Then I go back and do all the vetting, and then we go and matchmake and get giving. So, and it's a tremendous opportunity and pleasure that I get to help serve philanthropists in my new role. I came up with this a few years ago during COVID and decided to launch it this year. I have a background in fundraising for nonprofits for almost 20 years, working with everything from big nonprofits, Salvation Army, Red Cross, Save the Children, to higher ed, to smaller nonprofits, and have learned so much and learned everything from donors to strategy to serving the community.
How fun is that?
Yeah.
That sounds
Really
amazing.
cool.
So I
Thank
imagine
you.
you're working with a lot of high net worth people, right? And I'm really curious. I'm not one of them yet, keywords, but what do you see as some of those biggest motivators with these individuals when it comes to their giving? Maybe their trends, their patterns, their alignment. What are some of those biggest motivators?
Yeah, it's a few different categories. I think it depends on the individual that I'm working with and where they source their wealth from. And so I find that some people who are from generational wealth have philanthropy built in. And so they're very used to giving and they love giving and they love to support their community. Maybe they enjoy arts. There's different motivations. Sometimes they carry down a family legacy. So that's fun to watch and refine and help them with. Um, Other donors who have maybe come into money by, their business ventures or they were employee number 4 at Google, things like that.
Imagine.
Yeah, right. I know. They approach philanthropy a little bit differently. And a lot of them, what I'm finding is that the base of their success is from problem solving. So I feel like that a lot of these donors, especially those who come from a very strong business background, are interested in how can we solve a problem in the community? How can my contribution push a needle, push an initiative? A lot of them come to philanthropy from personal experiences in their life, especially those who have had tragic situations with family members involving their health, and you'll see them put money behind research. So it really depends, but I think the main motivator for most everyone, I know typically the response is, oh, tax return. No, they want to make an impact. They want to partner, they want to push a needle, and they want, to really help a community thrive.
I love all of that. And I've seen all of that. I've not been necessarily in your position and had the privilege to do the work that you're doing, but I can only imagine for some. I mean, philanthropy, as I said before, we hit record for this conversation, it's sometimes a really hard word for me to say. And it
Yeah.
can be overwhelming just in general, this concept of philanthropy, right?
Mhm.
So I'm curious if philanthropists, I said it, are feeling overwhelmed. There's a lot of donors in this space, and I coach my clients to say, if you're not asking, you're not receiving, because philanthropists give. They give year over year consistently. And the only way you will receive is if you ask, right? Like being a part of that. But I'm really curious when it comes to the overwhelm. Have you
Mm.
identified if there's like some main barriers perhaps that create this overwhelm? And then also, how can we as nonprofit nerds and nonprofit leaders, right, ease this process? That was a lot,
Yeah.
but like, can you unpack that with me?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. So it's interesting because when you think of the overwhelm, we're looking at it twofold. There's an internal overwhelm,
Yeah.
right? Am I making the right decision? Is my gift going to make an impact? If I put money behind this organization, are they going to sustain themselves or are they going to fold next year? So there's a lot to think about, especially again, with donors who are in lockstep with their financial advisors and estate planners. You're getting a lot of different advice, right? That's why you hire a philanthropy advisor to be like, hey, let's, chat more about this. But yeah, so there's a lot of internal overthink about it. And then externally, what are we looking at? Our country has 1.9 approximately million nonprofits. How do you choose,
Yeah.
right? When you go to visit a nonprofit, maybe you've identified one. What's their website look like? Is the information clear? When you're ready to make a gift, is the information readily available? Is the tax ID number all over the place? Is, the mailing address correct? So I feel like that and it varies. It's not consistent. Maybe one place will have everything,
Mhm.
locks, like I said, like a lockstep kind of situation, but maybe another organization doesn't. So now if you've budgeted in your mind to support 3, You may have found one. Well, why don't the other two have matching websites? So it's just like a lot to really think about. And yeah, so that's how I would, look at it. It's even overwhelming for me to speak about it once I start like getting into it.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Kind of going off the cuff here though, Eva,
Yeah.
like how does someone find you? How do they know that they need a philanthropy advisor, right? Like
Yeah.
I didn't really know this existed when I started 20 plus years ago in my career. And
Mhm.
so like how does that even start?
Right. So that's a great question. I think a lot of people, I think 20 years ago, there weren't that many of me's, right? Like you would find me at a community foundation, for example.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe a organization that specifically housed a bunch of funds, like a collective of foundations. You see those in major metropolitan areas. So, how you would find me, and typically what I do is I partner with wealth managers, estate planning
Yeah.
attorneys, and
Yeah.
CPAs, and I help them twofold. One, what to listen to when your client's kind of exploring philanthropy. Number two, having that conversation that may feel difficult for the wealth advisor, right? And then three, bring me in. And I'm here to help and take that philanthropic expertise off of their lap. And then I can work with the client one on one again on everything from let's get clear and figure out what it is you want to support to,
Yeah.
okay, are we going to do it from a DAF? Are we going to sell stock? Are we going to do that? All this kind of stuff. And then, close out the gift and help them manage the relationship with the nonprofit going forward. So.
I'm kind of smiling. I know you can see me because we're on video, but for
Yeah.
our listeners, I'm smiling because I'm like, okay, I will know that I made it when my advisor says, you know what? I want to introduce you to Eva Fordham. She's an expert philanthropy advisor. Like, I feel like that's when I know that I've made it, like really having that handoff, if you will, from
Right.
that other trusted advisor in my life. So I appreciate you sharing that because and I also appreciate you assuring me 20 plus years ago, it wasn't really a thing, except for in these community foundations, like, yes, it was a thing, but not like you've made it and others have made it now. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I want to ask you about these donor experiences because I can only imagine, Eva, and would love to have a coffee or a cocktail with you and hear some of these stories, right? But like, is there a difference between a good donor experience, right? Going from a truly meaningful and transformational experience. And I'm sure there's some like horrible experiences. So, like, what really is that difference between the good and the bad?
Yeah. So let's go from good to great. Good.
Yes, I love that reframe.
Good is, hey, I got my tax acknowledgement, I got a thank you letter, and maybe it had a personal note. I got a thank you card. I got an impact report that was personalized, right? These are things that are good.
Yeah.
But how do we go to great, right? And this is where it gets tricky because this is something I've noticed has been hard for some nonprofits to pull off for a variety of reasons. And what that is being able to really showcase the work. And a lot of that is inviting donors to come see your work in action. And not only that, but you really, and I may talk about it later, about incorporating the family, right? So you get the kids involved, whether this is through a volunteer activity at a food bank. Let's say, they're allowed to have children and you could, do something like that. A lot of parents want to teach their children about philanthropy, I've noticed, but sometimes organizations can't, have children there. But maybe if you can't have them do volunteering hands-on, you could bring them to come see the work or encourage them to do like a small activity at school or something like that. Great donor experiences are inviting them to be a part of a very serious conversation about the state of the agency. What do they have to say? What if you just listened, and kind of heard, their take on it? a great donor experience is having like I said, having one of these forums, but maybe you invite their friends, and have it be like a bigger collective. Can your organization create a giving circle? What can your organization do to help your donors feel proud about what they're doing?
Those are such great examples. And listeners, I hope you were taking notes because I know I was. It's like, I love the good to great because you're right. Like, let's not go from bad to good. Let's go from good to that next level, right? And let's
Yeah.
just keep pushing that envelope. I know I've heard horror stories. I've seen it in action, like all kinds of different donor experiences. So great opportunities. And at a separate opportunity, I would love to nerd out with you about this generational philanthropy and modeling that. I have a teenage son, but as the nonprofit nerd, this is the life that I lead, and he has observed and witnessed me in many different philanthropic opportunities, be it of my time, my talent, or my treasure, right? Just in all of these different ways. So that's really cool to hear. And yes, I would love to, separately have another conversation with you. But you're in LA, is that right? You're in
Yes, I am. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I think there's a really big like entertainment scene in LA. Insert sarcasm because
Yes.
obviously there is
Yeah.
a little bit of one. But I'm curious to hear from you, what you're seeing, how this culture of philanthropy is shifting around you in this California area. There's so many changes in entertainment. There's so many changes in giving. You even mentioned DAFs, right? Like how is this changing? What is it you're seeing?
Yeah, so that's a great question because there is I've spent half of my career in San Francisco Bay Area and half of my career in LA. I'm in the same state. I feel like I'm on two different planets, because I feel like in Los Angeles, with the prevalence of the entertainment industry, it shifts a lot of dynamics with philanthropy. Sometimes, because it's such a volatile environment, people tend to hang on to their money more. But then when they do really well, it's like sky's the limit. I think a lot of entertainers really enjoy being able to use their platform to amplify a nonprofit's message. And they are generous and they do give. What's happening now, and I'll just say for 2025 or 2024 into 2025, is that we're seeing a slowdown in the industry. And so this ultimately affects people who maybe had significant funds to give away for nonprofit to now shrink. Maybe those people have left the state. There's a lot of people leaving California as well, right? And also, maybe they feel jaded from supporting the last presidential election, and maybe their candidate didn't get in. They put a lot of money behind it. People are still feeling defeated about that. And then you have the wildfires.
Yes.
Now, that was an incredible example because the latest report that I just saw is that $650 million were raised to help people in the Palisades and in Altadena. That is huge. Right.
That
But
is
no, it's fantastic, but it's earmarked. So how does that affect all the other nonprofits in the area who are seeing rising rates of need?
mm,
And so what do we do there? Like, how do we, it's so to kind of go back on what I was saying, LA is a very generous community. The entertainment community, they are incredibly generous. But now we're starting to see that most of the giving is very, focused on disaster support, elections. And what do we do for the rest of the organizations who are here doing work 365 days a week? So it's interesting times, but I will say that LA is a very resilient area and they always figure it out. And, we'll see how everything, shakes down. And then just to go quickly on donor advice funds, a lot of, in LA, but everywhere, everybody's just really leaning on that vehicle now. We have a lot of changes coming with the upcoming tax laws. People are putting money in DAFs. They have complex situations where they're liquidating assets, put it in a DAF, that kind of thing. And so the other shift is navigating how do we, help nonprofits with the staff funding.
Yeah. Wow, that is a lot. And I appreciate you calling out, because I feel like as fundraisers, especially since March of 2020, right, we have really been in this crisis survival era, like fundraising for catastrophes. And it's like one thing after another, after another, after another. And to hear that a lot of that funding in LA was really earmarked. And so you're right. I mean, I don't know, you had mentioned, 1.9 million registered nonprofits in the US. I'm not sure how many there are in the state of California, let alone like that, LA specific area. But to hear that they're earmarked, and to hear that there's still so much need for these other organizations, that really makes me pause. Like, it makes me pause and think, what is that answer? What is that solution, right? Like, what does that need to do? And not just do, but be aware of.
Yeah, I think, I don't know the answer for that, because I think that it was, at that time, being in Los Angeles it was just so endearing and so wonderful to see the community come together like that. And we see it in other communities, not just LA, but in the Bay Area when the wildfires were happening up north. If you like, everybody, we are so good to each other at times, right?
Yeah.
In times of disaster.
At times, yes.
I know, I'm like, at times. In times of disaster, I know. So how can nonprofits who are providing daily services be able to convey a message that there's still a great need? And that's something that I think nonprofits may want to consider, kind of amplifying that a bit more.
Well, and I think that takes me to my next and really final question. But authentic relationships, I think, are so critical. You come across as a very authentic person, which makes me excited to talk to you. It makes me invested in this conversation. What advice do you have, or do you give, right, nonprofit leaders who want to build and lean into these authentic, lasting relationships, in particular with major donors, in your case, high net worth, right, individuals, as opposed to transactional, where maybe we still think of some donors as ATM machines? So do you have any advice on how we can really lean into this authentic space?
Yeah, I think, I've been giving this a lot of thought. And I think that the best way, honestly, is to take a step back and ask yourself, is this the communication that I would want to receive? Is this letter compelling me? I'm, a donor. I support not me personally, let's just say, you've got somebody who's supporting 25 grand a year, 50 grand a year, and you're, does this communication make me feel good? So I think it's really just stepping into the donor's shoes. And I think that engaging them as a partner, as a thought partner, just again, kind of, let's hear the whole feedback, right? Here are the amazing things that our organization is doing. Here's where we're having some problems. What would you do? And listen. Personalized communications, I think, are, really important. I think also personalized giving plans, and providing donors with an opportunity, to really feel as if they're making a big impact, which I'm sure they are if they're picking your organization. But how can you enhance that? So I think that, just put yourself in their shoes sometimes, write the communications as if you're writing a letter to yourself, maybe, and be like, okay, yeah, this would resonate with me and this would make me happy.
I appreciate that. I feel like I see too often this copy and paste, or let's just regurgitate what we did last year. And we as people are craving connection. We are I am connection and authentic connections. And I do know when I get a letter that's like, this is a template versus, wow, they really paid attention to my giving history or my motivation of giving. So great advice. And I can only imagine, Eva, so many of our listeners, if they haven't already met you, are going to want to know
Yeah.
how do we connect, or how do I learn more about Expert Philanthropy? So tell us, don't be shy. Where do we find you?
Yeah, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. I think that's the best way. I do have also a website, expertphilanthropy.com, where you can always reach out. But I think LinkedIn is probably one of the best places, and I'm happy to chat with anyone about this. I'm very passionate, in case I didn't carry that across. So,
You did, at least for
yeah,
me. I see it, I hear it. I know we had one initial conversation. It's been months ago. Again,
yeah,
shout out to Muhi that made this connection. I could hear it and feel it then, and that was even before video, because we did old school telephone. As I hold up my, my fingers, my thumb and my pinky. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, very passionate, as am I. So I think that definitely carried through. Okay, final question, Eva.
Yes.
What final words of advice or suggestions would you like to leave our listeners with today? So you've already given us some really good food for thought, some very tangible things to work towards. Any final advice that you want to leave listeners with?
Yes, two things. One, please pay attention to assets and make sure that your organization is shored up, that you can start receiving donations of these kind of things. So donor advised funds, have your tax ID number on almost on every page of your website, because when people are looking to make a donation, that's the special number that they've got to put into their account in
Right.
order to drive something through. Also, yeah, and as I mentioned, make sure you can take stock, make sure you can take any other appreciated assets, and because that's going to be the way people are going to probably be giving going forward. One other thing, we are talking about, a group of individuals who have high capacity. Don't forget the people who are the tier below. You can focus a lot of effort there, but don't get disappointed if it's not working on your timeline or on your budget. Focus on other tiers. Don't forget about them. They're there too to support.
Great advice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And yes, invitation, connect with Eva on LinkedIn. You'll find her there. We're connected. So if you find me, you'll find her and the like. Thank you. I appreciate all of this.
Thank you, Jarrett.